And we are live. Good evening, everybody. How are you all this evening? My name is Vincet Kelly, and I'm delighted to be here tonight to give you this free webinar about mastering your interpersonal skills. And it's quite an important one because you need that. You need people to be able to relate to communicate to achieve your goals with, whether it's in relationships or family or your business or whatever it is. So, thanks for joining me. I want to welcome everybody who has clicked in and logged on from YouTube, from Facebook, and from Instagram first. And for any of you, you can comment tonight and your comments will come straight around to me and I'll be able to reply to them because I have somebody keeping an eye on those platforms. And I want to especially welcome everybody on Zoom. I've got Zoom open here in front of me, so I'll be able to answer any of your questions as you're going along. You can simply put your message into the chat and I will answer any questions that you have, and I will also ask you sometimes during the webinar for any examples. So as it's a webinar, it's not just me talking. I will at some point ask you for examples and you can pop them into the chat. You don't have to, but it would be really great if you did because it gives me feedback on how you're getting on the webinar and so forth. Okay, so I just want to welcome everybody there on Zoom. Anna, Tricia, hi Tricia, Borka, Marta, Shayla, Sabrina, Otis, Caroline, Bindu, and there's a C there. I just can't see the name under the C. It's something C, the bottom. And then there's Walter, Sonia and Carmel. Thank you so much everybody for joining us tonight. Now, what I ask everybody at the beginning of all my webinars is would you please just put down where you're from. Are you from Ireland? Are you from what county in Ireland are you from? If you're not from Ireland, where are you from? Would you just put it into the chat because I really like to know where everybody is. You know, sometimes I get people from like I've had people from Pakistan, from Chicago, from Germany, you know, all sorts of places. So I'd really like to know where are you from. If you wouldn't mind popping into the comments or popping into the chat, that would be fantastic. And then we'll get going. Okay, Kashion, that was the name I was looking for. Hi, Kashion. Okay, Carlo, fantastic, beautiful. I'm from not too far from Carlo originally, Kashion. Tricia, County Clare, love Clare. Otis from London, love London. Shayla from Texas, never been to Texas. I think of Dallas when I think of Texas. Dallas, the series that we used to watch when we were kids. Sabrina, Italy. Buongiorno. I think that's right. Sonia, the Highlands. Thank you, Sonia. You're very welcome. Bindu from Dublin. Good stuff, Bindu. Thank you. Walter from Croatia. Thank you, Walter. And Igers is our host there as well. So if you don't want to put something on the chat there, you can pop a message into Igers, who's basically answering any questions. But otherwise, you can just pop them onto the chat. And Carmel from Dublin. Hi, Carmel. Okay, everybody. So let's get going. Now, on this area of improving your interpersonal skills, there are very, very many things that you can go over with a person, from the way they dress, the way they approach people, the tone they use, how you select your friends. There's a lot of different things. Now tonight, we're going to go over two factors, just two. One of them, and I'm going to break it down for you, is the most important thing when you are talking about interpersonal relationships to have applied in terms of getting to know somebody else and to relate to them and to improve your relationship with them. And the second thing is the thing that ruins the whole thing. Now, my webinar tonight is based on this book called Dianetics, which means through the mind. And this webinar is the free introductory webinar to a 4-part online course that I deliver on a Friday night between 8 and 9 called The Mind Explained. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the very end. Okay, let's get rolling. So, the most important thing in interpersonal relationships, number one, is something that you probably already know, is this one. Okay, communication. Excellent. Great. Nothing new there. If you can communicate well with somebody, and if they can communicate well with you, You can get your ideas across to them. They can get your ideas across to you. They can get their ideas across to you. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and the relationship can improve. Now, I'm going to tell you what the formula is to ensure that you have a perfect communication with somebody every time. Now, it obviously takes two to tango, so it involves two people, and there are aspects of each person that need to be in. So I'm going to show you the ingredients of a successful communication. And if you apply this, and you take each point of this, and you start applying it in your communication, you will find that communication becomes easier for you. You're not as worried about it. You're more confident in it, and it stresses you out less. So, first point, you've got obviously two people in a communication. Okay? We'll call this cause. Cause basically means the source point, or where the communication is coming from. Right? So if you want to write to your friend in Italy, you just send them an email and you are being cause. You are sending out a communication. And it's vital because you are a living human being. It is vital that you communicate. You send out communications because that's life. The next part is this factor here called distance. Okay. Pretty obvious. You know, if you're writing from Dublin to Italy, there's a distance factor on the email line. Or if you're communicating to somebody across from you, at the moment that's usually 2 meters, so the distance is 2 meters. And when these lockdowns finish or whatever, maybe we can bring it back to 1 meter and then less. So the second factor is distance. And the third part is the person receiving the communication, and we call this the effect. So we have cause, distance, effect. So 1, 2, 3. Cause, distance, effect. Effect is somebody who's just receiving the communication. Now, for the communication to be successful, here's the next ingredient. And this is number 3, and this is intention. Now, intention means how much do you want to get this communication across? Intention is the push, the drive, the effort that it takes to get this communication across, the wanting to get the communication across. So, for example, if you want to communicate to your son and you decide, you know what, I want my son to wash the dishes. Now, you have to have the intention that you are going to get that communication across. Now, maybe it'll take a while for you to develop an agreement, but you're at least going to get that communication across, and you have to intend to do it. So if you're going to communicate to somebody, you're going to intend to get that communication across. You're going to want to do it. You're going to say, well, you know what, I'm going to get this communication across. If there's no intention there will be no communication. Now, the intention also has to come to some degree from the other side as well. So this person has to have the intention, obviously, to receive your communication. So this is where it involves two people. There has to be an intention to receive. If you're not bothered about whether the person really understands you, if you're not bothered about is the person going to really get this, then what's the point in even starting the communication? Because it's just going to result in an incomplete thing that sits there for you both, that builds up bills. So this is number 3. There has to be an intention. You have to want to communicate. If you don't want to get that communication across, then it's not going to happen. For example, if somebody comes up to you, a salesman, and you don't want to talk to him, you don't want to tell him about this, that, and the other, that part is missing. So the more talking you do, it's a waste of time. It's kind of useless because you don't intend to get the communication across. Or if there's somebody that you decided that you don't want to communicate with, and you're trying to have a conversation, whatever, but you don't even want to talk to them. So that has to be there. Now there is, in the second part, I'm going to go over a factor which ruins this and causes you not to even want to communicate. So that's the first factor. Sorry, number 3. Number 4. This is the next one, and it is attention. Now, what that means is basically you have to be awake. Now, I know it seems very obvious that when you're communicating, you're always awake, but there are degrees of being awake. Now, if you're half sleepy and you're trying to, talk to somebody and it's like you're not really even thinking about it, your mind is elsewhere, you're off thinking about something else. You're off thinking about football, but you're trying to talk to this person about the job, but your mind is on football. That means your attention is elsewhere. So when you're starting a communication with somebody, you have to make sure that your attention is there, and that you're awake, and that you're interested. Because if your mind is elsewhere, if you're thinking about the football, well then go off and watch the football. If that's what you want to do, go off and watch the football and then have the conversation afterwards, when the football is finished. If that's what you want to do. Apart from that, then just, if you can't go watch the football now and it's not realistic, well then get your attention here into the actual communication. So it's really important that you're actually there. Now, that also applies on the other side. So there's a person that is there and wants to get the communication across. Now on the other side, this person also has to have attention. In other words, they have to want to listen to you. They have to be there. If you're trying to talk to somebody and they're off dreaming about something else, or they're not listening to you, or they're not even there, it's very hard to get a good communication going. So when you're doing and carrying out a communication, you do need to be aware enough to see, is the person ready to receive your communication? Are they awake? Do you have their attention? So when you're talking to somebody, if that person is off thinking about something else, or they're too busy with something else, for example, you go home to your wife and you want to say something, but you can see that she's busy with the kids. Her attention is not there. Her attention is with the kids. When she's put the kids to bed and whatever, and your wife is now there, and you can get her attention, then you can get the communication across. But, the attention needs to be there. So these factors are important. There has to be intention, and there has to be attention. Now again, there is a factor which causes you to drift off, to wander off and not be there for another person. So that's the fourth factor. The next factor is this thing called duplication. Duplication basically means to make a copy of. Okay? So it basically means to copy. So for example, if person A, let's say we call this person A and this person B, wants to communicate about a tree, okay, so however they want to do that, you can communicate by words, or you can communicate by email, or you can communicate by letter, or you can communicate by hand gestures, or you can communicate by an object, whatever. There has to be a duplication on the other side. What that means is this person must have made and must make a copy of what you wanted to say. So person A says a tree, this person says a tree. And that's what they get. The next factor is understanding. Now, I'm going to show you how this all kind of cuts together when I finish this. This person has got to actually understand what's being said. So you have to make sure that when you are communicating, that first of all, you want to get that communication across. You're going to do it. You intend to get this communication across. Next thing is that you are there. You're actually awake and alert, and your attention is there. It's not on some other things. You know, if you're too busy with other stuff at the moment and you're off doing other things, well then, you know, do that stuff and then come in and get this communication with somebody. You have to have the intention, you have to have the attention, and you have to make sure that this person understands what you have just said. If this person has no clue what you said, then your communication didn't come across. It didn't arrive. Now, there are a couple of factors that will make it easier for you to make yourself understood. For example, if I speak Irish, I speak some Irish, but not a lot. If I speak Irish and I'm speaking to a person who speaks only Norwegian, and I'm trying to get the communication across, do you want a cup of tea? But he doesn't speak Irish and I don't speak Norwegian. Now, in order for me to get that communication across so that it's understood, I would just go on Google Translate. It's easy. Google Translate, translate Irish to Norwegian, then with that package, present that, and then there's an understanding. Now, if we didn't have Google Translate, I could simply get a cup, show them the cup and say, you want, drinky tea? And he goes, oh yeah, I get it. So that communication is a simple, single thing. You have to intend to get your communication across. You have to be there. You have to be awake, alert. And you have to make sure that the person on the other side gets it fully and understands it, understands what you're saying. Now, that also depends on how loud you are. Maybe it's noisy in the room that you're in, so you might need to speak a bit louder. Also depends on the speed of your communication. Some people speak very, very fast. So if this person speaks too fast, this person is not going to get it. So you have to make sure that your speed is not too fast. Okay, so that is another factor. We'll pop that in at the bottom. We have speed and volume. Those are important factors when you're trying to make yourself understood. Now, as I mentioned, communication is not just one person, it is two people. Hi Caroline, I see you're from Kildare. Love Kildare. Communication is not just one person. So when you start the communication, you have said to this fella, I like trees. Okay? And this guy gets it and responds with me too. And that finishes the communication. This guy goes, oh, great. He just smiles and goes, oh, great. So, to kind of put this together, cause, distance, effect is the receipt point. There has to be intention to get that communication across. There has to be attention. You got to be there and interested. And that applies to both sides. There has to be a duplication. The person has got to actually copy what you just said and understand it. And once he does, or she does, they give you back an acknowledgement, which is a sign that they've got your communication. If you don't get this acknowledgement from the other person, how are you going to know that the person actually understands you? Now that might not be words, it might be a nod, or it might be this, or whatever it is, but there has to be an acknowledgement, and then that finishes the communication. So it goes over here, it gets understood, and it comes back here. That's the end of the cycle. That's the end of one cycle of communication. Now, obviously, It can't be just this guy speaking and speaking and speaking and the guy answering and answering and answering. Some people are very good at giving out communication, and some people are only good at taking in communication. They don't say a lot, they just take it in, take it in, take it in. So, to finish off this communication cycle, and for it to be an actual communication, it has to be two-way. In other words, after this fella has got his message across, and it's understood, and it's acknowledged, that's that cycle finished. Now it's up to this fella to switch roles, and this person then does the same thing on the other side, and an acknowledgement comes back that way. So in other words, a good communication has got to be two-way. For example, if you have a friend and they're just talking, and they just never stop, it's often because you didn't acknowledge them. In other words, you didn't finish a sentence or two. You didn't say, I got you, I heard you, oh, I see what you mean. I know what you mean exactly. Me too. You're dead right. You didn't actually let them know that they've been heard. And quite often, that's all they're looking for. Just to be answered. Now, on the other hand, once you've acknowledged them, then it's up to you. It's your turn to actually communicate back. So if you're the quiet type who doesn't say anything, who doesn't come up with anything, that's something that has to change. Because a communication is not just one way. You can't just be the receiving end all the time. You have to turn that around and be able to push it out. Now there's things that you can do to practice that and so forth, but to make it better, but it has to be done. And as I mentioned, there is a factor which messes the whole thing up, but we can go over that shortly. Now, a couple of problems can happen when this person doesn't stop talking and doesn't allow this person to acknowledge, and so never finishes. And he's stuck with all these incomplete communications. Also, if this person doesn't say anything and only responds, or doesn't even respond, this person is also left with a whole pile of incomplete communications. So in other words, what I'm telling you is the very first step in improving interpersonal skills is to get this basic structure in with one person at a time. Look, it can happen very fast. It doesn't have to be like robotic. Oh, now we have to have intention, attention. You know, you're not a robot. You're a living human being. And this is it's a flow. I'm just kind of slowing it down and breaking it down. But these parts, these ingredients absolutely have to be there. So if you have a friend and they're just talking, there's something wrong. If you're the type of person and you're just listening, or you're the quiet type and you never even answer. Like, for example, have you ever known anybody and you talk to them, but they don't even answer you? Like maybe, let's say you have a grandparent and you're talking to them. You say, oh, I went to the beach today. And the grandparent doesn't say anything. And then you tell them, I went to the shop as well. And they still don't say anything. And sometimes that can be deliberate, where the person is giving you the silent treatment. And that can be really, really frustrating. Why? Because it causes these incomplete communications to stack up and stack up and stack up. If you go to your grandparent and you say to your grandparent, I went to the beach today. And the grandparent says, oh, that's really nice. That's the end of the communication. Great. That's not going to hang up. And obviously you can say a few more things, but at some point you're going to have to let the grandparent speak. You know, shut up for a while. Just stay quiet and give them the opportunity to say something. Because now it's their turn. So in a communication, it has to be balanced. It has to be two-way. And then when you're listening to what they have to say, you've got to make sure that you acknowledge that person. You tell them, I got you. I got what you said. This is why when I'm on a webinar, I really do like to actually get some feedback from everybody who's been on the actual webinar. This is why I ask for examples, because I want to make sure that you understand the information. I want to make sure you understand it. Now, you, I'm sure, have somebody in your life where this is in naturally between the two of you. Okay? So you will find that if there's somebody in your life that you have a very good relationship with, it means that all of these factors are naturally in. They're actually naturally in. But if there's somebody that you just can't stand talking to them, or they can't stand talking to you, there's one of these factors that are missing in that communication. If you apply this in this little this formula, cause, distance, effect, with intention, attention, and duplication, understanding, you are going to find that you're going to be a lot less worried about communication and a lot more confident about communication. Just relax. Make sure that your communication is coming across and that you give the other person an opportunity to communicate back. Okay? Now, this is your first practical exercise. This is not a test or anything like that. I just want to give you an opportunity to give me your examples. So now, what I'd like you to do is think of an example of somebody in your life that you have a good relationship with, and pop it into the chat. Because with that person, you most likely have got all of these factors in. So give me an example of somebody in your life that you have a good relationship with. You can pop it into the chat, please. And that will be somebody where you can make, they understand what you're saying, and then you understand what they're saying. There's a mutual understanding between you. So take a moment to just think of an example of somebody in your life that you have a good relationship with, and if you don't mind, pop it into the chat. Okay? And then we'll have a look at it. And by the way, hello to everybody else who's joined there. Did I mention Sabrina? Hello, Sabrina. Shayla, I think I said hello. Martina, Stan, and Jalen. Thank you for coming. Just take a moment to pop in an example of somebody that you have a good relationship with in your life. And we just want to have a look at, and then we will move on to the next step. I'm going to then go over what messes this up, because there's a factor, which is the point of this webinar, because this is very straightforward. It makes sense. I'm sure you'll agree it makes sense to do this. And if you do this in life, things go better. But there's a factor that messes it up, and I'm going to go over this with you. Okay, so a couple of questions coming in, so we'll just have a look at them. If conversation cannot wait, if it is urgent, would it be fair to say that it may appear to the person that you are choosing something or somebody else over them has more of a priority than the person themselves? Can there ever be some common or middle ground? 50? Yeah, well, okay. I mean, with that question, Otis, he's just asking there, what if the conversation can't wait? For example, you've got something urgent to speak to your wife about, and she's handling the kids. Okay, well, if it's urgent, if, let's say, one of the kids has fallen outside and it needs to go to the hospital, then you're going to need to get, first of all, her attention. Okay? Because right now her attention's on something else. You have to get that attention somehow. So it doesn't mean that you have to, oh, you know what, I'll wait until she's put the kids to bed and then I'll tell her about the kid that has just fallen outside. No, you need to get the attention. You can maybe say, honey, can I get your attention for just a minute? You could even just say that in a very nice way. Could I just get your attention for just a minute? I really need to say something to you. And then you've got their attention. So, yeah, as long as you have their attention, then the communication can happen. Yeah, I hope that answers the second question too. Both persons of communication want the same or similar outcome, being accepted for who they are. Thank you, Otis. Accepted for who they are, getting their voices heard and being understood. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he asked there, is it the intention of both parties to have this go well? Of course it is. You know, who wants to be involved in a communication that's horrible? We don't want to be involved in a communication that's horrible. We want to be involved in a communication that works well and works smoothly. So this helps both people. So thank you very much, Otis. Somebody from YouTube, how would you communicate with someone who won't allow you to communicate? Okay, well, you know, obviously anybody in life has a right to give communication, but also to receive communication. So, for example, I have a right not to communicate with somebody and not to receive communication if I don't want to. So the fact is, I hope this answers your question, you do have a right who you want to communicate to and with. If somebody calls around to your house every day and they're selling you bags of sugar, you have a right not to answer the door. You have a right. So in terms of, let's say it's somebody you love and they don't want to communicate to you, and they've put down the barriers, this factor still applies. You can still have the intention, you don't have to give up. You can still have the intention to get your message across. You just have to make sure that that message and how you communicate it is understandable on the other side, and you have to have some way of getting the person's attention. You know, maybe the person does not want to speak to you one-to-one. Maybe they just can't stand the sight of you. However, they might accept an email, or they might accept a letter, or they might accept a card, a birthday card, or they might accept something, some way of communicating. So it does depend on the speed, the volume of the communication, but also how you communicate as well. So I wouldn't give up on it, but it does come down to how you get your communication across. So if you're trying the phone all the time, they're not answering the phone, maybe you could just leave it for a while, send them an email, invite them for a coffee, you know, whatever it is, you could do that. Okay, Stan, a very good one with my mother. Okay, Stan, and you will find, Stan, that this communication is probably very good. She's probably very good at saying what she wants to say to you. You're probably very good at listening to her. And on the other side, you're probably very good at saying what you want to say to her, and she's very good at listening to you, and you both have this acknowledgement going on. Okay, Walter, actually I realise that I have all parts of the cycle in all my family members here, and I should not be so critical sometimes on Mom when she is thinking on something else. Yeah, good, because there is a factor, thank you Walter, there is a factor which causes a person to daydream, to go off thinking about other things, and to find it very hard to focus on the conversation, and we're going to go over that in a moment. Bindu, a friend of yours, thank you. Jalen, how would you communicate with someone who won't allow you to communicate? Okay, that was... Okay, same question, okay. Any tips for the receiver in how to communicate if they struggle to communicate? Yes, Martina, thank you. So Martina, if you're obviously the type of person who just likes to receive communication, it's vital that you start to come up with communications yourself. It's going to make you feel better, and it's going to help you to improve relationships. You absolutely have to. You can't be just always on the receiving end. You know, communication is a two-way thing. So probably the best tip is, I mean, there are exercises and things that you can do to improve your communication skill and how you get your communications across. But the first thing is to get these factors in on the other side. So if you want to reverse these, and now you're usually the effect point, you're going to have to change this around to cause. So you just come up with something that you want to say. So for example, let's say if your dad is communicating to you all the time, but you never say anything back to your dad. Now, your communication back to him doesn't have to be deep. It could be simple as something that is an honest communication from yourself. So keep it honest. It's best if it's honest. If you try to fake communication, it's very easily sensed by the other person if you try to fake it. So it should be honest. So maybe, let's say if your dad is always talking to you but you're not talking to him, maybe you could say something like, maybe you like his car. You could say, hey Dad, I just want to let you know that I actually love the wheels on your car. He's like, oh, okay, It doesn't really matter what you're communicating about, as long as you're interested and it's something realistic for the person. For example, if your dad hates cars, doesn't have a car, doesn't like anything to do with cars, cars is a really touchy subject, well then just don't talk about cars. Pick something that is realistic for the person and then communicate what you think about that to the person. And you can get a two-way conversation going. And then whatever you say, be prepared for the answer, because you're going to receive an answer. And when you receive your answer, just say, okay, I got that. So it doesn't really matter. You don't have to make it too complicated. Just say what you think to the person. Obviously, make sure that you're polite and all the rest of it. You have to have manners as well. But say what you think to the person about the thing. It doesn't have to be dramatic. I hope that helps. Tricia, what do you do if a person close to you has a tendency to avoid or move on when a subject isn't resolved, fully explored? Is it best to make that known at the time or later? It's an online relationship, which makes it even harder. Yeah, it's a very good question, Tricia. If that communication is not completed, it is going to hang there for you. It is going to hang. And it's going to hang for the other person, which is not good. So it is best to actually try and to address it at the time. And if the person hasn't answered you, you can just simply say, hey, remember I told you that I went to the beach yesterday. Did you actually get that? Oh, yeah, I got that. Sorry, I was making a cup of tea. Oh, that's fine. So yeah, it is important to try and get the communication across. But it could be a case where you don't have the person's attention or intention to receive that communication. So you might want to communicate about football, but the other person doesn't want to talk about football. Well, find something that you both agree with first and start communicating about that. And gradually, as you do that, it will improve your ability to talk about the thing that you really want to get to, But don't be in too much of a rush. If you're pounding the person with communication about football, but they don't want to talk about football, then find something that you both agree with first and just build it up. And then maybe start to bring in football. Maybe you can eventually interest the person in football. Okay, I hope that helps. Yeah, I know online it can be difficult because it's not in person. It can be difficult. Sometimes communication can backfire when you try to engage or contact them. You don't want to try too hard. At the same time, not to be too complacent. I think there needs to be a balance or some form of openness or connection. Yeah, the authenticity is a really important factor. Thank you, Tricia. The authenticity is a very important factor. The honesty is a very important factor. And yeah, good point, Otis. Thank you very much. Yes. So, you actually ended off on a good point. This word backfire. Why do these things backfire? So this is something that you can use on an immediate basis to improve communication and relationships and your interpersonal skills in your life. You can start using that straight away. Now I'm going to get to the thing that messes it up. And this comes straight from the book. It's something that I refer to in all my webinars. And I'm going to show you what this is. And also, if you have any examples as we're going through this, I'll give you some examples so that it's fairly clear. And but if you come across any examples, just make a mental note of them because I will ask you for them as well. Okay, so let's put this communication cycle back in. I'll make them a bit smaller because I want to... Okay, so what you're looking for is a really nice two-way communication. Okay? And... So now I'm going to explain to you what the problem is and why it is that people react, why it is that people give you the silent treatment, why it is that people can be so irrational about the way they talk to you. They're talking crazy. They can just talk calmly, but instead of that they're losing their temper, they're going mad. Or the person just won't answer you. It's like trying to get an answer out of a stone. You might as well be talking to a door. So why is this happening? Because logically speaking, both people want to have a good communication. Now, one little thing I want to just tell you very quickly first. Each person has this thing called a mind. Each person has a mind. Now, a mind is simply a collection of pictures from your past. So, if you remember your breakfast this morning, you have a picture of that. Do you remember your breakfast, by the way? Great, I'm sure you do. If you remember your breakfast and you close your eyes and you can think of your breakfast, that is simply a picture of your breakfast. So your mind records pictures of things, it records information, and you use your mind to come up with what to say and what to do. Okay? So for example, you're talking to somebody and you know from experience, from your knowledge, that this person hates football and it stresses them out every time you talk about football. So you're starting to talk about something and the conversation is going in the direction of sports. So now you're trying to work out, what do I say next? And you've got a little picture here, a memory of a time when they got really upset when you spoke about football. So you know, okay, you know what? I'm not going to bring football into it. So you use your mind and the information that you've learned to work out what to say and how to say it for each individual person. And that applies on both sides. Okay? When the person is answering you, they work out, okay, you know what? I want to improve the relationship with this person. What do I say back that is going to make it go better and not going to make it go worse? So you use your mind, the record of your past experiences, to work out what to say next. You know? How do I answer this? Now, the problem is this. The problem is that there is a part of your mind that's not under your control and that can affect the thinking which comes out, which affects the words or no words. So both of these people here have a separate compartment of the mind, and in Dianetics we call this the reactive mind. Now what is the reactive mind? Okay, let me just put a bit of marker here. It's a reactive mind. The reason it's called reactive is because it's a push button. We've just called it push button. In other words, it doesn't think. Because you normally use this part of your mind, your normal mind, to think and work things out. But there's a part of your mind that doesn't think. It just reacts. Now, very briefly, and this, if you want to have a look at the full definition, it's on page 50 of the Dianetics book for anybody who has that book. This part of your mind stores up two things. One is moments of physical pain. Impact and unconsciousness. Now, that's the first thing it stores up. So, for example, if you had an accident or you fell off a motorbike or you got seriously injured in a car crash or whatever it is, that's physical pain, impact, and a degree of unconsciousness. It might be full unconsciousness or it might be partial unconsciousness. Because when the pain comes in, if there's a lot of pain, what happens is that part of your mind switches off and everything gets recorded in here in this separate compartment, in this reactive mind. The second thing that's contained in here is losses from your past. It's basically painful emotion. So, for example, that would be the loss of a friend or a family member, somebody that you loved, a pet that you loved, a job that you loved, and that was there no more. And so that's a big loss. And those two things store in your reactive mind. Now, the reason it's called reactive is because all it takes is for this person to say something, or to do something, or to behave in some way that's similar to what went on here, or in some way triggers it off, for this part of your mind to react and to take control. Because when this part of your mind starts kicking in, if somebody pushes your buttons, and all that means, when someone says they're pushing your buttons, it just means there is pain from your past that is getting triggered and it is taking control. It can take control of your thoughts, of your body, and of the things that you say and do. So you might come out with the wrong thing. You might come up with the wrong thing to say. You may lose your temper with somebody. Or you might give them the silent treatment. It comes up with illogical answers. It comes up with just reactions. It's push button. So for example, if you have somebody in your life, like a family member, and they know exactly what button to press in you to cause you to lose your temper, that's what we call the reactive mind. All they're doing is pressing something that's buried in here somewhere. Now you don't know where it is, or it wouldn't be really affecting you. It's something buried in here. And this is what in Dianetics, I call it the hidden influence. It's the thing that affects you without your consent. So I'll give you a couple of examples of this. Let's say you were, maybe I could just draw this actually. Maybe I'll just draw this. Oh, I'll get rid of this stuff here. I'll get rid of this for a second. Oh, I'll get rid of the whole thing. Why not? Okay, so let's say that here, in your reactive mind, you have a memory from when you were, let's say, 10 years of age, and this guy, this teenager, he was all dressed in black and he had long black hair or whatever, and he basically punched the living daylights out of you, okay? And it was a very severe incident, very severe. So that's stored in your reactive mind, okay? Now, you don't really think about it for years, life goes on, that's it, you don't really, you might remember the guy vaguely from years ago, but anyway, this reactive mind sits here. And that incident sits there. So how does this affect communication? Here's how it affects it. Let's say you're now 25 years of age. You've got a new job in a great company, and your job is now to do a presentation. And in the presentation, at the very back, there's a guy that you haven't seen before, okay? And he's got long black hair, and he's wearing black, and he doesn't look like the happiest of a character. Now, there may be absolutely nothing wrong with this guy. There may be nothing wrong with this guy. But what the reactive mind says is danger, stay away. It says stay away from this guy. So, because the reactive mind doesn't think, it just reacts. If there's something similar out here to what happened here, it tells you stay away. And you get this funny idea, you know what, I don't really feel comfortable in this presentation anymore. I don't feel like I want to do it. I don't want to talk. Now even if, let's say if this person during this incident back here said shut up and stay quiet, maybe those words start to come in. Shut up. Maybe he starts shouting, or he gets a bit impatient in the presentation and he tells everybody to shut up. It's very illogical. Or he shuts up himself and he becomes very withdrawn in the communication. I know it's a bit of a bizarre example, but all I'm trying to demonstrate here is that something in the external environment to do with a person could trigger off something that is buried in your reactive mind and could cause you to react and say and do things that you normally wouldn't do. In other words, you lose control of the communication. Now, there's another example I made up here. Okay, let's do another one. I'm going to show you this as well. So that's an example of how a physically painful injury from your past could affect communication present. Now, so let's say you have another one here. Let's give you another example. I'm going to ask you for examples in a minute of any time that you might have reacted and said or did something that you didn't really mean. Okay, so let's say here you are and you have an incident here when you were a teenager and this was the death of a grandparent. Okay, it was the death of a grandparent, and you are very upset. Okay, tears and just very, very, very upset because of the death of your grandparent. Now, while this is happening, to some degree, the normal mind switches down and the reactive mind starts recording everything, including words that were said. Now, let's say during this loss, two uncles come about and they start having a fight. And during that fight, one of them shouts, "Shut your mouth." Okay? During the fight, one of the uncles shouts to the other uncle, "Shut your mouth." Now, those words get recorded in this thing called the reactive mind. Okay, so that happened when a person was 15, let's say. Never affected him. Never affected him at all. Grand, we just moved on with life. Now, years later, this fella Joe is married. Okay, and he's married here to Mary. Okay, and it's been going great. It's been going absolutely great. But one day, Joe's a bit tired. He's had a hard day at work, and Mary's tired as well. She's had a hard day at work too. Whatever she's been doing, whatever he's been doing. And then Mary, because Joe didn't time his communication right, maybe Mary snapped at him and said, "Joe, for flip's sake, what are you doing? Like, please." He might come in and say, "Hey Mary, is the dinner ready?" Without realizing that Mary has just come in from the shopping and whatever, and she's just too stressed. And Mary comes out with, "Oh Joe, for flip's sake, you know what? I don't know why I married you. I don't know why I married you." Okay? Now, she didn't mean anything by it. She didn't really mean anything by it. She says, "I don't know why I married you." But there's enough of a potential of loss in here to potentially trigger off this loss here. So the reactive mind goes, "Okay, same situation, I'm going to actually react again." And it starts to affect Joe. First of all, tells him to stay away. Okay, so he doesn't feel like hanging around with Mary today. And if he hangs around, maybe these words start coming out, and maybe Joe says to Mary, "Oh dear, shut your mouth." Maybe he says that to her. Ouch! What a horrible thing. Now, Joe's come out and he's told Mary, "Shut your mouth." Now, she didn't deserve it. She didn't, all she said was this, but it was just I don't know, she didn't even mean it. But instead of actually going, "Okay, you know what? Mary is just in from the shopping. You know what? I'm going to cook dinner tonight. And because she's had a hard day, and I'm going to make it special. And that's what I'm going to do." Instead of doing that, Joe reacts and tells his wife to shut her mouth. Now, what do you think that does? What that does, remember that Mary also has her own baggage. And if in the past she had upsets of her own where somebody treated her like that, she's going to start reacting to him, he's going to start reacting to her, and before you know it, it's a mess. Not only that, but what this reactive mind does is it keeps your attention in the past so that you're not really in the present. So it affects all parts of the communication. Now, so very quickly, so just to summarize that, basically, there is a part of your mind which stores up the pain from your past. It's called the reactive mind, and it gets triggered by things in the environment. And when it gets triggered, it can take control of your thoughts and your body and your actions. And you can say and do things that you don't really mean. And that can get you into big trouble. Or it can cause you not to communicate when you should communicate. So now, what I'd like you to do, this is the next exercise. I'd like you to think of an example. Think of an example of a time when you reacted and you said something and afterwards you went, oh, why did I do that? Why did I do that? So just think of an example of a time when you reacted and you said or did something afterwards you went, oh, what was I thinking? So please, if you don't mind, take a moment to think about an example of that. Of a time you said or did something that just didn't make sense. So just give you a moment to do that, please. And by the way, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, you can pop your comments in. It will come around to me through Zoom. And once I'm finished this, I'm just going to summarize, wrap up, and then I'll tell you what I recommend for you both. Yeah, okay, Otis, I got your question there. So when you get into the conversation and there's a conflict or a difference of opinion and so forth, right, yes, and you tend to focus on the negative side. Well, the main thing to remember is this reactive mind is the biggest thing that gets in the way of you smoothing that out. Because honestly, if you're using that communication formula that I showed you, back and forth, the thing should go very well. Even if you're in a disagreement about something, you can communicate your way through it. You listen to them, acknowledge them, they listen to you, acknowledge you, and it can go back and forth. But when the reactive mind kicks in, all hell can break loose. So I hope that helps. Okay, and let's see what else we got. Someone just said hello to me, I said hello back, but kept something angriness. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so if somebody says hello to you and you say hello back, there should be no reason to get frustrated or lose your temper or be angry. But yeah, if you're angry, then this is usually reactive. Okay, and Tricia made an assumption about reasons for someone's behaviour without asking them directly, irrespective of whether I was correct or not. That's a great example, Tricia. And because, you know, in a conversation with somebody, all these thoughts can start kicking in, and you're like, where are these coming from? I'm immediately suspicious of the person, and I don't really know why. Well, it has a lot to do with the past, and how the past is kicking in and affecting you. And really and truly, I can't tell you exactly what exact thing it's coming from, because every person has a different set of baggage, different things that were said, so it's very individual. Okay? Okay, and then afraid of the answer and that it would hurt. Yeah. Okay, well, at the end of the day, it should be the case where, you know, you give a communication and you're going to get an answer, and then you got your answer, and then that's it. But if there's all this fear about, oh, what if this answer comes in, and what if that, you know, that's like a fear of loss. And again, it relates back to the reactive mind. It relates back to baggage. Okay, so if anybody else has any, I hope that helps, Tricia. If anybody else has any examples, then please pop them in, or if you have any questions. So now, very, very quickly, I'm going to take up Martina's one here. Okay, how do you communicate with someone who has no interest in learning how to communicate? Can't exclude them from life as family member, and I'm not that type of person, as family important to me. Person only like to hear their own voice. Okay, great, Martina. It's a fantastic question. You know, happens a lot in family, you know. And you know why? It happens a lot in family because the people involved, the family members involved, have shared baggage. They've often gone through the same bad experiences. So they're actually reacting to each other a lot. So they're reacting. The best solution, especially when it comes to family members, is to help each person to clear the baggage. And it starts off with you clearing your own baggage so that you're able to think clearly and you know how to communicate with this person, and you can do it logically. And also then when you do that, you're much more able to deal with the other person. And of course the other person has to handle their baggage as well. So if a person has no interest in learning how to communicate, it means that they probably have sunk down a lot in their life because of past bad experiences with communication, with losses, with relationships with people. So they're carrying around their own stuff. So this new thing that you're trying to get them all, oh, come on, hey, let's go and talk about this, that, and the other. They're just not interested. Why? Mainly baggage, mainly the reactive mind. And then when they don't answer you, then you get triggered, and then you start getting frustrated as well. So that formula of communication I gave you works. But as I mentioned, it's inhibited or it's stopped by this baggage that you carry around, this reactive mind. So I recommend for you, Martina, is that you get a little bit of education first, and the Mind Explained modules, which I'm going to explain in a moment, will be very, very good for you, to understand why it is that a person goes downhill and how their past affects their ability to communicate. So it'll be very, very good for you to do that. Okay, good stuff, Otis, thank you. So we're going to be wrapping up now in a moment. So I want to very briefly go over what we just covered. Number one is apply that formula of communication. It works. And it works, and make sure that you keep in all those points of intention, attention, and make sure the person understands you. You listen to what they say, you acknowledge what they say, and that your communication gets across. And second of all, and most importantly, is, let me just show you very quickly. Is to clear up the baggage. Okay, now, so the person is carrying around this baggage, and this baggage has got pain, and it just gets triggered. So the baggage has got pain, and it gets triggered every time there's communication happening, or certain communications press somebody's button, you know, or you're being too direct with somebody, so they get very stressed out, or you're being a little bit nice to the person. You're being nice to the person, but then they get stressed out because you're too nice. So all this is just reactive. Now in Dianetics we have a thing called auditing. Auditing means to listen, okay? And it's done with two people, and it basically involves helping a person clear the baggage. And I go over that in more detail in my 4th module of the Mind Explained. Okay, so to wrap it up, you've got the communication formula, but the key thing is to handle the reactive mind, the baggage from the past. And that's what Dianetics is about. So this leads me on to what I recommend for anybody who's been on the webinar tonight. If you want to improve your interpersonal skills, yes, you can use the tools of communication. There are many of them out there. But if you don't clear up the reactive mind and your baggage from the past that you're carrying with you, what happens is all it takes is somebody to press the wrong button, and you get these uncontrolled feelings, thoughts, stresses that kick in that affect the way you communicate back, or actually cause you to stop communicating. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, there is a 4-part online module that I do, an online course. It's called The Mind Explained, and I'd recommend it to everybody. It's based on this book, Dianetics, and what I do is on those 4 1-hour modules, they happen on a Friday night between 8 and 9, we go over the basic structure of this reactive mind and break it down simply into its basic parts. There's like 4 or 5 basic parts, and on the last module we go over the procedure on what to do to start clearing it up. And you might think, okay, hang on, I don't really want to talk about my mind because this got nothing to do with communication, and I only want to learn about skill. It's absolutely vital to clear up this source of reactivity that goes on. Okay, so it's called The Mind Explained. As part of the enrollment for the course, this book, which has got 500 pages in it, and it contains everything that you need to know, is sent out to you as part of the enrollment free of charge. So the entire cost of the whole 4 modules is €20, and it's very cheap because just want you to find out more about it first so that you can decide yourself where you want to take it from there. But it will really give you a good picture and a good perspective on people and about yourself and about how to improve relationships with people in your life. So that's the book that it's based on. So I deliver this module every Friday night. It's 1 hour. It's a 4-part. and you can sign up at any point. So if you are interested, there's a link there that Agar's put up, and you can have a look at that after the webinar is finished, because the chat is going to stay open. You can sign up on the modules, and after every module, I give you exercises to do, and you send them in to me personally, and I'll correct them, make sure you fully understand it, make sure you fully duplicated it, and any corrections, I'll let you know what they are. So I really, really hope that you can do that. It's called The Mind Explained. It's 4-part, it's €20. The link is there. The link is going to stay there for anybody who wants to have a look at it after the webinar finishes. And so that's all. So I really hope that you join me Friday night to get started. I want to say thank you very much to everybody on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram for your attention tonight. And for everybody on Zoom, thank you so much for your examples. Thank you for giving me your time tonight. I really appreciate it. And personally, just thank you to Walter, Karen, Tricia, Marta, Sabrina, Otis, Caroline, Bindu, Kashion, hope I'm saying that right, Martina, Stan, and Anna. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I will say good night, and I hope you have a beautiful evening, and I really do hope to see you again on Friday night. Okay, everybody? And as I mentioned there, it will be open at the end of it. Okay, thank you, Otis, and Walter, you're welcome. Bindu, you're very welcome. Okay, folks, so thanks a lot. Have a beautiful evening. Bye for now.